What's up, my Pangyanos? Andy with Andy Vlogs. Excited to share with you guys this content here. As the title suggests, guys, we're going to be going over a big review of the S22 Ultra and the 13 Pro Max. Now, the majority of this is going to be occupied by the camera and the differences between all of those settings and shots and whatnot. So that's going to be saved for the end. But I did want to show you here cosmetically and kind of hardware-wise the differences between the two. So with that said, here we may be using some accessories. I may show you a few things here that I've purchased on my own that I'll have affiliate links for if this is something that you're interested in. I also have a full breakdown of the S21 versus the S22 and then a separate video of my review and thoughts on the S22 Ultra itself. With that said, guys, hit that subscribe button and please consider helping out the channel by checking out the links down below. Let's go ahead and jump into my comparison of these two devices. Right off the get-go, these are my opinions here. I'm going to go over the hardware in just a second, but after I've had a chance to utilize and play with both of these devices, here are some of my comments. The iPhone is much more of a lifestyle device here, meaning that there are so many more companies out there that have products and accessories that support all of the features, whereas Samsung, they don't necessarily do. So for instance, PolarPro, Moment, and Shiftcam, these are all third-party companies, and Nomad, who make cases, who make peripherals like lenses, who make grips like the Progrip, and who make rigs to be able to film and shoot cinematography. Now, all but one are not compatible with Samsung. I can't get any of the lenses on here. There's no cases that are made currently that fit them. And the Progrip is pretty universal to be able to grab onto this and hold it, and you can connect to it Bluetooth, but that's about it. If I want to add a lens, if I want to add, you know, a really cool case, if I want to have like a grip or something that's specific to the Samsung, I'm kind of out of luck. I have to use last year's stuff or the previous years to kind of work it. There's nothing like concurrent that they make, I could be wrong, that fits the Samsung S21 Ultra family. On the iPhone side though, there's so many out there that do. It's numerous. Taking these out of the case here, both of them deal with metal and glass, and they look beautiful. I've got the space gray on the iPhone, and the Samsung, I think this is the gray, or this is the graphite. This is the ½ terabyte. I couldn't get the terabyte. This is the terabyte. You've got, you know, a camera array that is gigantic and chunky that pokes out. You've got your own I/O. Apple's got its own. Samsung has its own. They also have the pen, so that's one difference between the two. Both wirelessly charge, although Apple has their own proprietary stuff that, you know, magnetically connects to it. But you can get the peripherals here, like a circle magnet that works those. Both are priced about the same, like over $1,000 depending on the size that you get. Battery life is pretty comparable. The screen size on the S22 Ultra is about ½ an inch bigger at 6.7 inches as opposed to 13 Pro Max at 6.1. The Samsung S22 lasts longer because it has that adaptive screen that goes from 1 Hz all the way to 120, whereas the iPhone only goes from 10 to 120 adaptive. Samsung S22 Ultra can go up to a whopping 45 watts wired, whereas the iPhone can only do 20 watts, 15 watts wireless on both. Samsung has 4 cameras on the rear, iPhone has 3, but if you add LiDAR, I guess you have 4. But that's more of like depth and more of that deep fusion and computational photography. But if we go ahead and do 1-to-1 on the Ultra, Samsung has a 108 megapixel f1.8 wide lens. iPhone has a 12 megapixel with an f-stop of 1.6. So low light conditions are going to be a little bit better. Ultra wide, however, both of them are about the same at 12 megapixels. The Samsung f-stop is 2.2. iPhone is 2.4. The 3x telephoto is a 10 megapixel with a 2.4 f-stop. On the iPhone, the telephoto is just a 3x at 2.8. Then it has the 10x camera, which goes to an f-stop of 4.9 and has a 10 megapixel sensor as well. Samsung has optical image stabilization, which is the lens itself stabilizing. iPhone has the sensor shift, where the sensor itself is shifting and moving and stabilizing rather than the lens. Now, we're just gonna be going over the video here today. We're not gonna be going over the camera, so I'm not gonna take any pictures, but I'm gonna show you the differences in you know, the shots, the camera, the exposure, sharpening, stabilization, all that good stuff. To let you know before we get started, all the different modes I'm gonna be shooting in will be upscaled or downscaled to 4K 30 to match this video itself, which is 4K 30. So just know if I shoot in like 4K 60 or 8K or whatever, you're gonna see that it's gonna be down-resed or up-resed if I'm shooting in 1080p. Alrighty, starting off here, as you guys can see, both of them are holding steady pretty well. I don't see any kind of a shutter or rolling shutter kind of a thing with 4K 30. You can see iPhone is pulling exposure way better here than the Samsung. Samsung is a lot more dark here, but I'm getting a lot more clarity here on the fence, on the edge there, whereas the iPhone seems to be blurring it a little bit. The iPhone seems to be overexposing it a little bit, but look at that. The darks are way... It's a lot more dark on the Samsung as opposed to the iPhone. Now that I'm pointing out to the sun here, it looks like the Samsung is making the fence a little more dark, whereas the iPhone, it's making it much more soft. The Samsung seems to sharpen stuff when there's a lot more exposure, when the light source is right at the lens. You are noticing here that you are getting much more light here despite the shade, because the iPhone has a 1.5 as opposed to the Samsung's 1.8. The iPhone has a higher aperture, therefore getting you much more light, as you guys can see. As we get closer to my favorite subject here, you can see that it's just all around much more dark on the Samsung. That's too bad. Getting closer here, you can see the iPhone kind of punch into the macro mode. Samsung punched in as well, but it's still kind of dark. Both of them have laser focus here on the 1X. This lens is so awesome here, honestly, on both cameras. It's hard really to compare the two. But as usual, the iPhone is just a tinge more soft. The Samsung is getting a much more rich, much more sharpened look here. It's having a hard time focusing on the gnarledness of the tree here. As I put it into the shade, the Samsung isn't catching focus good enough, and it's at this distance here, the Samsung is a little more shaky than the iPhone. Honestly, that's kind of interesting how that is. We're gonna just walk around here at a brisk walk and show you the stabilization. The Samsung does a far superior job than the iPhone. You can see the iPhone is bobbing and moving, whereas the Samsung is showing very little movement here. Yeah, it's just the difference between the two. Both have optical image stabilization, but the Samsung is just far superior in my opinion in that regard. All right, let's go ahead and move out to the ultra wide here. The Samsung is going to take the cake because you can see how buttery smooth it is. The iPhone just bobbles and wobbles and shows all of the micro shakes. Getting closer here though, it seems like the 13 Pro Max has a better aperture, therefore you're getting more light here when you're shooting the subject. I'm gonna go closer to these dried out raspberries from last year I didn't clean up. iPhone is taking a bit to get focus there, whereas the Samsung is pulling focus so well. As we move over, it pulls focus into the subject where we were at to where we're going. It's pretty good. Let's go to my favorite subject here, this pine cone. Seems got a different angle to show you here. The iPhone. Both of them have a similar color temperature. A lot more cool. Last year the 21 was much more orange, I would say, but both of them are matching pretty good. You got some deep blues in the sky there with the contrast on the white of my house. Okay, we're moving into the 3X here. As you can see, both of them kind of snap into view as I show my camera here as we're moving. It is much more stable on the Samsung, but both of them kind of lose that hyper stabilization as I step and kind of lose my balance there. Both of them look kind of grainy. I will be honest. The iPhone is showing much more lightness here on the 3X, as you can see. You can see more richness in the blacks, in the gradient of that basketball stand. Whereas Samsung's trying to make up for it by sharpening. When we get a subject Both of them have a nice shallow depth of field. There's a little bit of the shutter roll on the iPhone. Both of them struggle a little bit, but they do pull focus. I think the Samsung's gonna take it on this one. There's extra richening and contrast that the iPhone is trying to do that I don't really like. The Samsung's doing a great job stabilizing, whereas the iPhone is like just jittery. Lastly here, let's punch into the 10x, and then the iPhone goes to 9x. You can see that the iPhone does a pretty good job stabilizing. It doesn't really have smooth colors, whereas again, we still have an overall just over richness on the Samsung there. Samsung can obviously go to 20x now, whereas the iPhone is limited where it's at the 9x. Okay, cinematic mode and portrait video. It's basically the same thing. Cinematic on the iPhone, you get this really shallow depth of field. It actually looks like you have a prime lens, like a portrait lens. It's better on subjects that are like humans, not necessarily cameras, but you can see both of them are doing pretty good. It seems like the Samsung is punching in a little bit more in order to utilize that. As we back up, both of them have pretty good laser focus here on the subject. The portrait video on Samsung actually has a 3x mode, so you're able to get that shallow depth of field at a 3x, and it looks pretty good, whereas the iPhone, sorry, you still have the 1x. It's too bad. It's looking really good. It looks like it's a 85mm. I like the stabilization. I'm actually really impressed. I didn't review this on the comparison of the 21 and 22. This is really good. The iPhone just doesn't look right here. You're getting like too many like synthetic sharpening here, whereas the Samsung just, it looks really good. It looks clear. It looks believable. All right, guys, we are on the selfie mode now here. You're gonna see a significant difference between the iPhone and Samsung. The Samsung does stabilize. I don't think it has optical image stabilization, but it's got a stabilization that's far superior to the iPhone. However, the iPhone does better with the color, with the exposure, because I think the lens is better. So we're gonna show you, my face in direct light. It's pulling a lot more pink, or maybe a little more orange on my face, whereas the Samsung is a lot more cool in that regard. Going into the shade here, you can see that both of them do well with keeping focus. iPhone is having a hard time stabilizing the shot. Just generally walking gets you those micro shakes, and I hate it. I don't like it. I never use the selfie camera on the iPhone, but on the Samsung, wow, this is beautiful. Showing you here with a light source in the shot, you're still able to get a pretty good clear shot of my face from the iPhone. The Samsung's having a hard time. It is a little bit darker. Nonetheless, the iPhone, I think, is doing a better job. Having a portrait kind of a thing, like a shadow, putting my body in front of the light source blowing out the background, you can see that it's kind of overexposing on the iPhone just a tinge. On the Samsung, it's richening, or it's sharpening the video more than I feel comfortable with. My arm got really tired there. But as we move, it's able to pull focus. There isn't much like rolling shutter. However, the stabilization on the Samsung is far superior than the iPhone. Switching over here to cinematic mode on the iPhone, and then portrait video on the Samsung. It's basically the same cinematic kind of a thing. The iPhone is holding on to my face, as well as Samsung's having a hard time finding my face. It's looking to grab it to keep that cinematic look here, but again, it's doing a better job on the Samsung, keeping it stabilized. On the iPhone though, I'm getting a way better kind of a shallow depth of field, a better portrait lens look, 35mm look, whereas Samsung, it's still a little hazy, meaning that it seems like it's a flat image and then they're just adding a blur on the end, whereas iPhone is giving me, honestly, a much better shot, in my opinion. I think the tones are much richer, the exposure's better. This is a little bit, it seems like some of the colors are just kind of bleeding out of my face. For video here, there really isn't like a night setting, but both cameras seem to be doing much pretty much the same thing, but it seems like the darks here on the 22 much more rich. It looks like the S22 is trying to overexpose, getting into the top of my house. There's a lot of fuzz. I could zoom in if I wanted to like 10x, but it's gonna be just dark. Point 6x. And it's like pitch black here, and the 22 is doing way better. Oh, that's like super apparent. Doing a great job. '13 Pro Max just kills it. You can see my lawn. Then once it gets to 9x, it's pretty poor. But that 3x is pretty good. Well, my Pungios, thank you so much for watching this content here. While it was a little dry at the beginning, I think a lot of the camera differences are huge. They really speak for themselves. If you want something that's more rich, you know, the tone is much more saturated. If you want a lot more sharpening, and you want to have that distance to be able to shoot maybe from, you know, when you're in the stands and trying to shoot a video of your kids playing football or whatever, I think Samsung's way better. If you want something that's, you know, way more cinematic, a lot more options here, you know, attention to detail, you know, not too overexposed, and something that shoots very well, that has also all of the accessories here. I think the iPhone's for you, but some of that steady shot and that in-body stabilization there with the optical image on the Samsung is so much better than the iPhone. I mean, just that wide angle lens is so much better than what iPhone has done, and I think that's one big drawback of the iPhone. With that said, guys, if you guys like this content, hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more. My name is Andy with Andy Vlogs. Consider hitting that like button and checking out the links down below in the description. Otherwise, we'll catch you on the next one.